lose Senator Lee's?
Yeah.
All right. At the risk of interrupting my colleagues' laughter, I think it's time to reconvene at about 5 minutes past 1 on meeting number 110. I do want to just describe the process that we're going to go through here. We will, if we can, come to a decision in the rest of sometime this afternoon. If we feel like we've got the decision made, we will then vote to make the award to the presumptive winner tomorrow, if the presumptive winner agrees to the conditions that are attached to the award. Some of those are written out. We'll talk about whether any other special conditions depending upon who the presumptive winner is. So that we will designate who the winner will be, but it will be conditional upon the winner agreeing to the conditions, and the final formal award vote would be taken tomorrow morning at 9:30. Okay. Now that everybody's had a chance to think, anything to add, subtract, change?
I would actually like to add. I think it was a great discussion this morning. I think, however, that we were focusing a little too much on something on the margins, the benefits of something like an M3, D3, and numbers around those areas. I want to bring us back to the main thrust of the Gaming Commission, which is gaming. 125, we stand to make $125 million a year from the gaming operations in the form of about 49% of about $250 million a year of this operation when there's no competition. So I'm concerned mostly, or it's not a concern, I'm really focused on the ability to realize 125 million. There was a couple of discussion relative to a toss-up. I think you may have mentioned, Mr. Chairman, that the finance piece was a toss-up. I don't think.
I meant toss-up in terms of revenue generation.
Yes. Yeah. That's exactly what I wanted to highlight. It is a jump ball when it comes to market size, market location, and market size. The ability of each of these locations, by virtue of where they stand, to generate that. But then we need to look at, it's not a toss-up in my opinion, when it comes to operating these facilities, when it comes to realizing the actual realization of those revenues. We sort of put aside a little bit the notion of weighing. And I know this may sound a little presumptuous because I was the one who studied the finance piece, but I think that's the most important piece. Because as I was alluding to in my prior remarks this morning, the ability of jobs, of ancillary, of mitigation activities all stem from something that comes first, which is the revenues that these facilities can generate. So, I also wanted to mention.
Is there a difference between the revenues? I mean, I'm not sure I follow the end of that.
Well, the end is, I think we should go with the best operator. And in my opinion, the best operator, yes. In my opinion, the revenues are going to be what the revenues are. I think the finance section proved that the market sizes, by virtue of their location, are comparable. But in my ratings, we rated the Penn people to have the most experience operating, as demonstrated by a number of things. Not only their experience in many other jurisdictions, operating in jurisdictions of similar size and constraints. So I think that is the biggest, the biggest number, the main number that we need to be focused on. The ability of someone to actually generate what they project. Now, somebody may be a little bit more optimistic in their projections. Somebody may be a little less more pessimistic or have projected a bigger drop. It ultimately comes to, in my mind, who is the most likely to realize on their projections, whatever they are. And the realization of those are going to be what the market can bear. There was, you mentioned, Commissioner McHugh, there was a difference, of course, in projections of jobs, 600 plus versus 500 plus. Those projections stem, in my opinion, from the revenue projections, and they projected different revenues. But that's only their projection. Again, I thought somebody...
Mostly food and beverage is what had the ink. Isn't that what we discussed? That it was the food and beverage entertainment that generated the extra jobs?
Yes.
Well, my point is still the same. It's a projection, and it ultimately stems from whether somebody can actually realize as much as what the market can bear. So in my opinion, we pick what we think, and I think Penn is the best operator.
But if we take that approach, the track record in Maryland is that the Leominster folks run the most successful casino in Maryland of all of those. And in addition to that, all of the both sets of revenue projections were tested by you and HLT and found to be approximately within the range of reason. Both sets of projections. So you've got two highly qualified. That's where the jump ball, in my view, came from. You got two highly qualified, skilled people that know what they're doing, that have demonstrated success in the past, and they're making projections that come out at the end of 5 years about at the same place, and they both are within the range of expectations that you and other studies have shown. So it seems to me that you don't get a margin. The margin comes elsewhere. I don't disagree that revenue generation is a key to everything. It's a key to jobs. It's a key to everything. But I don't see a differentiation there.
Well, the Maryland example, I think, is important to put in the context of where they are. Maryland Live sits in a very dense, very high-income area of the whole state.
But they picked that. That was their shrewd decision
Which
when the law became available.
Which is great.
Shows how smart they were.
Yes, that's right. That's not where they are here. They are in a much less dense area. Now, Maryland also doesn't have a restriction, the restriction that we have here, which is the 1250. So I would argue that it's probably easier to operate when there's not a restriction on the number of machines. You don't have to be as efficient with the programs, with turning around seats and food and beverage, et cetera. You don't have to run necessarily a lot of shuttle buses or whatever it may be. I think it's important to focus on the fact that this is going to be there is a cap on this facility, and the operator that can understand that size cap better, and that to me is the difference between Penn and Cordish when it comes to the fact that they have several facilities of this size and scope in other places, and they are consistently profitable throughout all of their properties. Now, Maryland is likely to face competition from MGM as they were just approved a license in that area. So it remains to be seen what that facility in Baltimore is going to do, but that's neither here nor there.
But they do have competition now in Maryland.
Right.
Right. And in addition to that, sounds like a tennis match, but in addition to that, their revenue projections in year 5 are much higher than the revenue projections that we received from Penn. And so, about, as I recall it, well, I'm not going to mention the percentage, but they are significantly higher. And so even if they fail, there's a huge margin of failure. There's a huge latitude there before they get less than the Penn National folks. So
Well,
there's a huge buffer, I guess, in terms of economic expectations.
But that works against them because we believed that the higher, it is a bit of a match, I guess. We believe that Cordish, the Leominster people, projected a higher amount than the range that we project. So I think they're being overly optimistic. That doesn't mean that it's actually going to happen. No. That projections are projections. We cannot get into a discussion as to if somebody has a bigger number here but a lower number there. You know, there's a marginal difference. The biggest point that I drew from the market assessment analysis was that everybody should realize, and they do, that projections are going to drop, and that revenues are going to drop because competition comes in. And when you agree on that fundamental notion, I step back a little bit and think, who is the likeliest, who is the operator that is the likeliest to react accordingly, to be seasoned enough to respond, and I draw a lot of from their experience in many other places of similar size and restriction in terms of market. I would take a little, I have a different opinion relative to the corporate senior management being only financial engineers. I think the ability of the company to maintain a profitable operation across so many jurisdictions is remarkable. I think comparing 1 versus 28 is a very different comparison.
Well, I've said my piece. I don't understand. I don't follow the numbers analysis that you just relayed. We've got projections. We've got projections that are within approximately the range that you and others predicted. We've got success of both people, entities elsewhere, and we've got recognized decreases for the stabilization year when they're facing competition. How we can say that one isn't going to achieve the predictions, the projections, and I recognize what a projection is, that we've already said is within the range of reason because of I have difficulty finding, but I hear you.
Yeah, and I wasn't suggesting that. I could take us back to, we all recognize that these are all very experienced operators, but the difference to me is in the bench strength that they have in the case of Penn.
I don't agree with that analysis either, but it doesn't, I don't see any reason at all to think that they are going to be materially less effective operators. That doesn't exist.
I didn't suggest that they were going to be materially different.
I thought that was your whole point.
They're going to be different, not materially different.
Well, then why would you favor Penn?
Well, because they're slightly different, but better, in my opinion.
Not materially.
Okay, well.
All right. Anyway, all right. I think you get the
materially then.
Yeah, I think you do think it's material, which is what's the point.
Okay.
So I just wanted to expand on something that Commissioner Stebbins talked about, and this is, again, in the nature of sort of the philosophy of this business and what's behind each of our thought processes and our value judgments and how do we do this. And this is a difficult one to talk about, but it's in my mind, so I think I should. And that has to do with how racing cuts. We've all done our protestations about how much we care about it and appreciate it and believe that it contributes a lot and love horses and all that. But the legislature has made a decision to do something which off the top of my head, I can't think of any other situation federally or otherwise, but maybe they're models, but it's certainly unusual, which is to designate tax revenue to the subsidy, to the operating subsidy, effectively, of a business which is, without it, economically failing. There's many examples of one-time support, of temporary aid, of capital investment, of stimuluses, many kinds, tax incentives, all kinds of things. But I can't think of a model where fundamentally in perpetuity, the strategy is to support an industry which can't survive on its own. But that's not our decision to make. That decision's been made. Now we're talking about the extent to which continuing to support this industry is a critical variable in our decision-making process. And how much should our decision-making be affected by the fact that to award the license to Plainville apparently saves jobs and an industry, and not has a significant chance of killing those jobs in that industry. And what is the role of how much subsidy, if you will, does one industry deserve and need? If the industry can't survive with the Racehorse Development Fund, is it a value of us to step in on their behalf and help them survive by awarding a racing license to them? I'm sorry, a gambling license. I have a problem with that. You know, I understand all the benefits. I understand, you know, the green spaces and there are clear values. There are trade-offs. If we invest these monies, we get something back. That's true of most investments. But, you know, the industry needs to take a hard look at itself and figure out, you know, can we be viable and what kinds of changes and compromises do we have to make? They're not particularly great at working together and collaborating. There is no strategic plan. This isn't a transition strategy. This is a survival subsidy strategy. And it's, in a way, it's a bridge to nowhere. So now, should we be moved by the need to support this industry further? Should that be sort of the defining feature or a defining feature in our thought process? Should we deprive Leominster and all of its environment and the benefits that we all agree could accrue to that? Because if we don't do it to Plainville, the harness industry is at risk.
Mr. Chair, you're talking philosophy now. You're giving us a philosophy lesson, I feel like.
Well, let me just finish. Just to come to the conclusion, it is a matter of philosophy. So, the bottom line is that it's reaching. I don't see the compelling value of salvaging or saving horse racing being so valuable that on top of this operating subsidy, it should also drive our decision on the location.
I don't think that's what we're doing here today. I think I started this conversation and said that my analysis alone had Plainville slightly ahead on the analysis alone, and then other considerations. And in particular, we talked about M3D3, and we talked about racing as part of other considerations. And I started by saying, look, if we had a substandard applicant here, we were not going to issue the license because of racing. And I still believe that. We're talking about what's the added value to that applicant. Two very strong applicants, and in my mind, the benefits of those existing jobs and all the ancillary jobs that go along with that is more realistic in my mind and makes more sense than, you know, $1 million. It's far less money, frankly, if we look at just the revenue, and maybe $1.5 million, which again, I think it's futuristic. There are some good pieces to that, but there is no certainty with jobs. There is great certainty in my mind, and so we're not talking about. It's not our job to talk. Well, we can talk about whatever we want, but it's not our job to decide why are we saving an industry that is dying on its own. I'm not looking at it that way at all. I'm looking at what added value comes along with this application, this applicant, and putting the value there on those jobs, and saving an existing industry, which is part of the legislation. You want to refer back to the legislation, that is there, saving existing jobs. So I don't think we're talking about philosophy here.
Can I, just on that point as well, this is not in perpetuity. The decision we make today is for 5 years. It applies to the license and it applies to anything that happens with it, M3, D3, racing or otherwise. We or others will come 5 years or 6 years from now and look at, you know, whatever happened and make another decision. Now, the economics are going to be different. I grant you that. The landscape is going to be different, but there's no guarantees. There's nothing in perpetuity. I would just point that out. This is not. I would also just build on the comment you or take exception to the comment you made relative to a bridge to nowhere. It's a bridge to out of state. Our context, out of state. Our context is this state. We're not looking at the racing industry in the abstract or as a whole. If this license, when it comes to racing, doesn't go to attract people that currently live or make their livelihoods from this industry, will likely leave the state. And that has a economic repercussion to the negative. That is a small business that leaves, that's a job that goes away, that's somebody that probably has to move to a neighboring state. They're not going to necessarily stay in Mass and travel to West Virginia or Bangor. They will likely pick up and move. And that's the piece that I think is very important for us to consider when we consider the context of this. That can be a philosophical discussion, but it's really within the confines of Massachusetts.
Commissioner? You got any?
It was interesting, the discussion before. You know, step back and strip away racing, strip away M3, D3. When we focus on the gaming responsibility of our positions, thinking of what generates the most revenue, what has the best forecast for generating the most revenue, what has the best forecast for generating the most jobs, and more importantly, I think, is maintaining those jobs. You know, this is maybe, I don't want to say I'd lean towards conservative, but I think back to Commissioner Zuniga's point, I would rely on an applicant who has operated a number of these facilities. Some of them, as we toured, are certainly not near the hub of anything. No disrespect to people who live in Harrisburg, but to continue to generate revenue along projections based on experience, to continue to maintain employment, which I think is critical. I think we've all seen the angst, the anger that arises when competitors in Connecticut have had to go through difficult layoffs. I think in the back of my mind, which project has the best outlook to. Go ahead.
Mr. Chairman, we believe that the stream is down. I know that this is a pretty important point in the conversation.
Not necessarily.
All right, so let's hold for a minute until we can fix the,
We've had
Do I need
capacity
to go all
issues.
the way back to the beginning?
Ready to go? All right. We're back. Okay. Do you know how much we missed? How much they missed? Commissioner Cameron wanted me to give my philosophic speech again, just in case anybody missed it. All right. I'm sorry, Commissioner Stebbins. I apologize for the problem.
So in conclusion, no. I think I left off talking about, you know, I'm aware of the angst that we've seen to Connecticut with the changes in the gaming environment and how they're impacting Connecticut. People having to deal with losing their jobs, et cetera. I think what I'm looking for, and it's becoming a little more concrete in my position, that you know, going with the experience, again, sustaining revenue through the increased competition, maintaining employment levels so that operator, the Commonwealth, and the community aren't disappointed. You know, again, kind of puts me in the position of favoring the Penn application. But you know, again, let's to your point, strip away the discussion on horse racing, strip away the discussion on M3D3, and come back to slots parlor applicant to slots parlor applicant. And you know, in this case, if we're getting down to the fine details, you know, experience counts. You know, I see that experience counts a lot, and making sure at the end of 5 years we've done our job right and not disappointed anybody, or at least tried to keep to a minimum level of disappointment. But you know, it certainly doesn't mean that, Mr. Chairman and Commissioner McHugh, your points are lost in terms of feeling that this could offer a huge economic impact to Leominster. Being, again, they're a gateway city. I live in a gateway city. I get it. But thinking of the whole Commonwealth and the revenues we want to sustain and the employment we want to sustain, I think come back to being my critical points.
How do you conclude that there might be, that would there be more revenues and more jobs? Is it essentially because they're a more experienced operator? Is that the essence of the point?
I think that comes back to, and Commissioner Zuniga has made this point. You know, the site visits, again, I think gave me a good context into how each of these applicants are operating. I think Cordish has done an amazing job. They obviously were smart enough to pick the right site when they pursued their license in Maryland. I think it's still too early for us to know, as outsiders, to witness what will happen with the increased competition in Maryland. That was a state that said we're going to do 5 licenses. They just had a casino open in Baltimore. MGM is, much to the chagrin of the people I've talked to in the Anne Arundel County area, are disappointed that a 6th is going to be awarded because they think that'll drive increased competition closer down to the district in Virginia. And again, you know, the fact that the site visit out to Pennsylvania to see the facility that the Penn National operates in is an operation with a track, not necessarily a complete mirror of the town of Plainville, but certainly more of a rural area, no huge center of, well, everybody's close to Boston, I guess, except me. But I was able to maybe compare variables a little bit more closely by doing the site visits, and probably took a lot more away from that now in retrospect than I did at the time.
I don't have anything new to add, really. I think that, however, the discussion about preservation of racing versus something else is a perfectly legitimate component of this. I don't approach it quite the same way the chairman does. I think insofar as this is a unique subsidy, I mean, the federal tax code is a huge subsidy in many of its parts, and that's why some think that it's badly out of kilter, because it preserves things that, and encourages growth in things that otherwise couldn't stand on their own 2 feet. But I do think, and I also think, however, that this is not a competition between racing and M3D3. That's not the point I was trying to make before. It is looking at racing, which is, for all the reasons that I've said, something that I value highly, but looking at the potential for this casino, this slots parlor, to be located at a place where it can be a huge economic driver in a variety of different ways, if in the hands of the right people. And I said this before, so I'm not adding anything new. It seems to me that from what we've seen, what we've learned, and what we've read, that the proposed operators of this casino, this slots parlor in the Leominster area, are shrewd, entrepreneurial, outward-looking, inventive people who would be able to capitalize on the potential of that slots parlor to be a huge economic driver for that reason. It's not to say that the Penn National folks are not all of those things. They just have a different location, a different plan, and a different mission. And it gets down to the philosophical difference between which mission is the more valuable to the Commonwealth as a whole, in my view.
I don't think need to add either, and I think we're getting close here. I think the Plainville is a perfectly legitimate choice, totally legitimate choice. Absolutely. And a very safe, and the safe choice. I think it's a loss of an extraordinary upside opportunity, and I think that's a pity, but I've made my point. So I think really, Commissioner Stebbins, if you're firm, if you are at the point where you feel firm in your decision, then we've about done our job here. But if you feel that more conversation, I don't know if anybody else feels like they're likely to change their minds, but if you've been close and been wrestling, and if you feel like your mind's pretty well made up, then I think we're pretty well done here. But if you'd like to have more conversation, we'll do that.
No, I'm done wrestling.
All right. Then where we are at is to call for a vote on what I think looks like it would be the Plainville nomination, Plainville selection. And this vote, I'll let you articulate it. Judge, why don't I let you articulate it?
I would ask for a vote on whether we are in agreement to award the slots license, the one single designated slots license. And this is not the motion. I'm telegraphing what I'm going to ask for, so we can clarify it. That I would ask for a vote on whether to award the slots license to the Plainville applicant, provided that it accepts the conditions, statutory and other, that we impose on that license, and that we give that applicant until 9 o'clock tomorrow morning to tell us whether they will accept those conditions. Then I would ask tomorrow, if they do accept those conditions, for a vote to award them the license.
Right, I think that's right. Before we do put it formally to a motion, I've been wrestling with the issue about whether I would eventually, if we decided to go with Plainville, what I would want to vote for Plainville as opposed to Leominster on the theory of, being unanimous in this. But I'm frankly torn on that. I think it's not kidding anybody. Everybody's watched. Everybody knows what our opinions were, and I said at the outset that if we can have a unanimous decision, fine. If we can't, that will in no way compromise the significance or the clarity of the decision. And I think I'm a little bit inclined, and Commissioner McHugh will be interested in your reaction to this, to go ahead and indicate that I don't agree, because I think it's important for people to know that we've got our differences of opinion, and we air them in public, and we make our decision, and then we move forward. Does that make sense to you?
I'm going to vote the same way, but I would, if this doesn't for some reason, go forward. We have two really strong applicants here, and it doesn't have any, my vote doesn't have as much to do with this, it's not based on the strength of the applicants. It's based on the upside potential that I think exists with a different course. So I'm going to vote against this as well. But I am happy that we have two applicants of this caliber, and I'm confident that the Penn National entity is going to do a first-rate job. But I do think it's important to reflect the difference of opinion. So I'm going to do that. Okay. And I really think we've had a good discussion about this issue, and I think we've come to grips with the essence of the difference. And I think it's been a very positive and very useful discussion.
Yeah, and I just want to say as we approach the vote, I have a tiny bit of a sick feeling that we're missing a big opportunity for an important part of the state that could have been really something unique and something special. Just for the record.
I think that to choose is to lose. No matter from the get-go, no matter who we went with, we were going to lose two, and in prior times more applicants. But I share part of that feeling, but perhaps for a different reason.
Yeah.
Well, let's also try to be a little more reflective and a little more upbeat about where we are in this process. Yes, we've always known all along that one candidate or two candidates we're going to lose, but we're taking the next step in a long and lengthy process that's introducing gaming into the Commonwealth in the right way, and introducing gaming at a level of success we all hope to achieve.
And just to reiterate, I'll cast my vote, and then I will be an enthusiastic supporter and strategist and partner with the winner.
I echo that. I think, and I'm glad you said that, Commissioner. This is an exciting moment. We're doing it, and we're doing it with a quality team and a quality operation and a quality plan, and one that serves a lot of values, and it's an exciting moment and an energizing moment. So the philosophical differences I have don't detract from my enthusiasm for where we are and where we're going.
Same here. Do we want to enumerate the conditions that will be a part of this before we get to the motion?
I was just starting to pencil some out here.
And the staff, I think, is, do you want to come up? I think you've been collecting some too.
Mr. Chairman, members of the Commission, we've actually got a list that we have been trying to track and had in mind to reflect this list back to you, and then add anything that you might have to that, or take anything off this list that wasn't something you had in mind. This is the draft license format that Catherine's been forging at your direction, and the conditions start on page 8, 9, and then page 10. What I think part of the idea is to make sure that the conditions were what the Commission wanted, and make sure that the potential award winner is also aware of those conditions. Mr. Chairman, I don't know if you want me just to read through them, or how would you want to go about this?
I think, why don't we just read through them ourselves and just give us a minute, and then we'll talk about them. Well, maybe we ought to run through them. What do you think? Anybody care?
Well, I think as much as it takes time and it's kind of dry, but that gets back to how this was advertised. We should articulate them verbally so that everybody watching knows what
I agree. So why don't we, whichever, Catherine, let's just, as quickly as we can, let's just run through each one of them. You might specify which are new.
We'll start with, starts Category 2, gaming establishment license will be issued subject to the following conditions. Number 1, compliance with all the requirements of MGL 23K is now in effect and hereafter amended. 205 CMR 101, which is basically comply with the law and the regulations. Compliance with all applicable federal, state, and local laws, rules, regulations now in effect or as hereinafter amended or promulgated. The debt equity requirements as established by the Commission's regulation. Number 4 is the payment of the license fee required by C23K 205 CMR 121. Payment of assessments made pursuant to 205 CMR 121. Compliance with the terms and conditions of the host community agreement, surrounding community agreements, impacted live entertainment agreements, lottery agreements, any other agreements with communities or mutual aid agreements. The memorandum of understanding between the Commission and the Massachusetts Community College Career Institute. The affirmative marketing programs for those businesses identified, 23K Section 21, 2121, little 2 and 3 for design and construction of the gaming establishment, affirmative action programs identified under 23K 2122, and all federal, state, and local permits and approvals required to construct and operate the gaming establishment. Number 7, provide within 30 days of this determination a plan to the Commission for its review and approval, creating an affirmative marketing program for those businesses identified in, again, 2121. Provide within 90 days of this determination a plan for the Commission for its review and approval, creating an affirmative marketing program for those businesses, again, in 2121. Provide within 30 days of this determination a plan to the Commission for its review and approval, creating an affirmative action program, equal opportunity for those residents identified in 21 and 22. Compliance with the construction plan specification and timelines as approved by the Commission as required by Commission regulations. If the licensee is a racing licensee, according to 128 and 128C is now in effect and thereafter amended. Compliance with the terms and rules and regulations promulgated thereunder. The information included in the application filed by the license and the evaluation reports prepared by the Commission as part of the Commission's evaluation process are incorporated by reference. Work with the Massachusetts Department of Labor and Workforce Development and related state and local agencies to create a plan for approval by the Commission in consultation with the Massachusetts Department of Labor and Workforce Development to identify and market employment opportunities to the unemployed residents of Massachusetts. Provide the plan to the Commission within 90 days of the date of this determination. In consultation with the Regional Tourism Council and with the Massachusetts Office of Travel and Tourism, and subject to the approval by the Commission, create a regional tourism marketing and hospitality plan. Such plan shall include, but is not limited to, making space available in the gaming establishment or state and regional tourism information, links on the licensee's website to the Regional Tourism Council website, a joint marketing program with the Regional Tourism Council and Massachusetts Office of Travel and Tourism, staff training in regard to the plan and sharing of the visitor data with the Regional Tourism Council and the Massachusetts Office of Travel and Tourism. Such a plan shall be provided to the Commission for its approval at least 3 months prior to the anticipated commencement of operation of the gaming establishment. In conjunction with the Massachusetts Gaming Commission Vendor Advisory Team and any local grant awardee, create a plan within 90 days of the date of this determination for the Commission's approval to assess licensee requirements and to identify potential local vendors. Institute credit and collection practices that comply with the Commission's regulations and commit to prohibit aggressive collection practices. Comply with any free play standards set by the Commission. And in this case, the last one, we commit to being the LEED Gold certifiable in the manner indicated on the LEED Gold score sheet. Thank you. Had a little trouble with that last one.
But that's on the LEED Gold score sheet that they submitted.
Yes.
Right. I wonder if it's we should add adherence to the wage scale that they committed to, or any improvements there too. I don't know if it's necessary, but that I was going to add a general condition of adhering to all commitments made in the application, but that's awfully, what's a commitment and what isn't is awfully hard to determine, as, you know, the difference between a plan and a commitment. But the wage scale is a representation.
So that would mean that if there were an economic downturn and they wanted to reduce their wage scale, that they'd have to come to us for
Right.
permission?
Right. I mean, we'd work collaboratively, but that's our expectation. And maybe maybe that would be the condition. The wage, no downward alteration of the wage scale without the commission's permission.
I'm not crazy about that, just,
You said, I'm sorry, the wage scale?
Yeah, they've outlined, at least in broad form,
Right.
what they're going to pay the 4 different categories of employees,
Right.
represented what those payments will be.
I was going to, you know, one of the questions that we put forward to both applicants, and they both responded in the affirmative during the host community hearing, was their willingness to make commitments relative to the hiring or employment levels, which I think speaks to the wage rates, is a license of the condition, and both of them responded into the affirmative. So I throw that out as to whether that should be included necessarily. That was an item to be negotiated because we wanted to take economic considerations in mind, or any economic changes into consideration. But
Is there some, should we put something in there about that? I mean, are you in agreement that we should put in adherence to the wage scale? We don't have a wage scale for each position, right?
Right.
We have, and the numbers we got are averages for gaming, for non-gaming, for administrative, other positions. And so there's still a lot of flexibility in there, provided that they meet those averages. But I placed reliance in my thinking on those averages that were represented as what they were going to pay. So that's why I raised it.
Yeah, well, I think it's easy enough to put it in. They have until tomorrow to come back and say otherwise. And even if it's not tomorrow, they could always, the way you've articulated the condition is that it would be subject to revision by coming back to us.
Yeah.
So I think it's fairly straightforward.
Just allows us to keep an eye on that, and I'm
Yes.
sure that they've made that representation in good faith. I'm sure they plan to adhere to it, but who knows what the future will bring. So,
Yep.
I mean, that's why I do it.
yeah. I'm not crazy about that for a couple of reasons. First of all, it's not, as you said, it's sort of a great wage scale, but it's what we're trying to hold them to something which is so imprecise that, you know, it can be very debatable about whether they're sticking to it or not. It's not really something very easy to manage. And it's just a degree of micromanagement and micro-regulation that I don't feel comfortable with. You know, I don't think our job is to manage their salary structure. So I don't think I'm comfortable with that one.
Well, let me just probe that a little bit. We're trying to, the whole discussion, an important part of the discussion that we've had today is focused on economic development via jobs. And the economic development via jobs depends on 2 things: the number of jobs and the amount paid to the job holders. And if we are saying that the two are, from a financial sense, the 2 applicants are in a dead heat on a lot of scales, and I thought this one was not doing as well as the other one on the pay scale. But that's an important ingredient of our economic analysis, it seems to me. And the job, it's like the LEED certification. There's a whole bunch of ways that they can get to that average. They can do whatever they want. If the average for job group A, administrative, is $70,000 or $50,000, there's a lot of ways they can get there. And I'm not saying that they should come and tell us how much they're going to pay each secretary and each other person, but just that they have an average in that department of $50,000. That's what they said they would do. So,
And I think we're, you know, part of the reason we are in the process of picking who it appears we're picking is because they have 28 sites, they're experienced operators, they've got standards within their within their company, that they're going to adhere to. I just don't see it as our, I mean, we've judged them to be a quality operator. We've done a suitability check that didn't find any history of employment grievances or anything like that. It just doesn't feel like a kind of regulation that I want to be a part of. Anybody else?
Well, one of the biggest pushbacks we have always heard since we started this job is how you're going to hold a applicant to keeping their commitments. I'm at least willing to entertain this discussion with the applicant tomorrow if they came back and wanted to push back or say no. But Mr. Chairman, your point of, well, we know they're a seasoned operator and they shouldn't have any problem meeting this, then why would they have any problem agreeing to the pay scales that they propose?
I'm just saying what I wanted, the business I want to be in as a regulator, but, it's not the end of the world. So are you in favor of it?
Yeah.
All right, so let's put something in there like that.
Can I mention a couple of other thoughts?
Did you have a strong feeling?
No, I have no problem asking them to meet their, meet what they propose to do.
Are we adherence to the pay scales proposed in the application? Is that
Right.
As part of their application, Plainville, Penn, had a comment that they could have an alternative of starting early with 500 slot machines. There was not a lot of detail in that representation. I never studied it in detail. One of the conditions that I would put is that they don't do that because it wasn't clear whether there would be any of the amenities that in general the statute calls for prior to the opening of gaming operations. So if we were willing to entertain that the notion of a temporary operation, then I would like to see more detail relative to the timing and scope of the amenities.
But do we need, I mean, they can't open without our approval, so
That's true.
Do we need anything, do we need another clause that says?
Well, it just occurred to me that my decision was all predicated on the 1250, the original plan that had the one that had all the detail. So I would put that to rest.
That actually was their preferred
Yes.
way of opening, would be the full facility. And if we preferred otherwise, they would entertain that, I believe is the way that was phrased.
I would prefer that they not.
Yeah.
That's right.
Right,
That
so,
was my
but
preference.
we've got plenty of control over that, so, okay. Is the MOU with Community College Casino Institute signed?
Yes.
It is?
Yes.
I
Okay.
believe all the applicants.
Okay. And item number 16 says, institute credit and collection practices that comply with commission regulations and commit to prohibit aggressive collection practices. To me, that's too imprecise. I mean, what's aggressive? I mean, if a legitimate party owes them money legitimately, credit-worthy and so forth, they have every right to be as aggressive, within reason, as aggressive as they want. But so, I would say maybe we want to, we know we're talking about this, we're going to be issuing regs, but maybe say commit to adhering to the commission's regulations, whatever which they obviously will anyway. It's a little bit superfluous, but just makes the point. But I think this is a little bit too vague.
I agree. I'd put a period after regulations.
Okay. And then the last one, wasn't in the suitability check, weren't there some conditions that were proposed? Was that simply conditions to suitability, or is that conditions that should be on the license?
I have to review the decision. Mr. Chairman, I have not, but I will. If there are conditions that apply post-suitability, I will add them.
She's
here.
nodding, right, and Director Wells is nodding. So we need to pick up the several conditions that were on the suitability decision and add them to this. I think they're non-controversial, I think, but they're important.
Can you remind me, Commissioner Stevens, that this applicant had both a project labor agreement and a labor harmony agreement executed?
Yes.
Okay.
So were there any other sort of location specific? Has this got everything covered except for the suitability ones, except from the suitability?
Yep.
Okay, then I think we are ready for a motion. Commissioner McHugh, do you want to frame it since it's a little complicated?
I will. I move that the commission award the Category 2 gaming license to the Leominster applicant. Sorry. It was
Trying to sneak it in.
one last attempt.
Second?
Strike everything. I move that the Gaming Commission award the Category 2 gaming license to Springfield Gaming and Redevelopment, LLC, provided that the applicant, Springfield Gaming and Redevelopment, LLC, agree to the conditions just recited and notify the commission of its willingness to do so by tomorrow morning at 9:30 a.m. And if the applicant agrees to those conditions, by that time, the commission will take an additional vote to make the award final.
Second.
Any further discussion? All in favor of the motion signify by saying aye.
Aye.
That would be Commissioners Stebbins, Zuniga, and Camera. All opposed? Nay.
Nay.
That would be Commissioners Crosby and McHugh. There you have it. We will, staff, Executive Director Day and staff will talk to Mr. Snowden and staff, and we will reconvene here. This meeting is temporarily adjourned until 9:30 tomorrow morning. We will reconvene at 9:30. Thank you, everybody, for your time and participation, and go forth.